I was seated 3 chairs down from the end of the table, ankles crossed, hands folded, posture straight. My notebook lay closed in front of me. The screen at the far wall still displayed the final slide from the quarterly review. No one had turned it off. "This is on you," he said clearly, without raising his voice. A few people shifted. Someone near the windows stopped typing. The CEO remained standing while the rest of us stayed seated. He looked directly at me, palms flat on the table, shoulders relaxed in a way that suggested confidence, not restraint. "You were responsible for coordinating outreach on the Redwood deal," he continued. "That deal collapsed, and we don't retain junior staff who cost this company 7 figures. The number carried weight. I watched a senior manager glance down at her screen. Another man leaned back slightly, as if distance might help. I didn't respond. I didn't adjust my chair. The pen beside my notebook stayed where it was. His mouth curved into something that might have passed for a smile. "Clear out your desk. HR will deactivate your access before lunch." The decision was framed as procedure. Not anger, not disappointment. Administration. The room quieted in stages. No gasps, no objections, just a collective stillness settling in. "For clarity," he added, "this is what happens when someone overestimates their role." A few heads nodded. Others remained forward-facing, unmoving. I looked down at the table at a faint groove in the wood where years of meetings had left their marks. I traced it with my eyes. The silence stretched. It felt intentional. He waited. I could tell he expected something, an explanation perhaps. When none came, his jaw tightened slightly. "That will be all," he said. "We'll continue without you." I stood when it made sense to stand. Not immediately, not delayed. The chair made a quiet sound against the floor. I picked up my notebook, still unopened. As I walked toward the door, I was aware of the attention behind me, not sympathy, measurement. The CEO had already turned back to the table, speaking to the room as if I were no longer there. The door closed behind me. No one spoke. My name is Alina Morales. I was 26 at the time, 6 months into a post-MBA internship that fed directly into the strategy team. I had relocated to San Francisco for the role and signed a 12-month lease 2 blocks from the office. My life was orderly, predictable, built on the assumption that competence mattered. I had not wandered into that room unprepared. I had earned my place there through coursework, referrals, and 18-hour days that rarely required supervision. My title said intern. My responsibilities did not. The Redwood deal had been assigned to me because no one else wanted the logistics. Outreach coordination, due diligence tracking, calendar alignment across 3 time zones. I accepted it without comment. That had been the pattern. When work was unglamorous but essential, it came to my desk. I had executed exactly what was requested. Every contact logged, every delay documented, every missed response escalated in writing. I had flagged issues twice, both times during scheduled check-ins, both times acknowledged and deferred upward. None of that was mentioned in the room. What mattered, apparently, was that the deal had collapsed, and someone junior was required to absorb the outcome. I didn't feel blindsided. That would suggest surprise. This was closer to confirmation. There had been earlier signs. Credit redistributed casually. Attribution adjusted in summaries. Praise traveling upward, responsibility traveling down. I had noticed it. I had not corrected it. That restraint wasn't fear. It was judgment. The imbalance wasn't personal. It was structural. Authority had insulated itself, and accountability needed a visible endpoint. I happened to be available. Fairness doesn't require equal power. It requires consistent rules. The CEO had exercised his authority in public, with witnesses, as if closing a file. What he removed wasn't just my badge or my access. It was professional standing, declared out loud. I accepted that moment without reaction because there was nothing to contest in the room itself. The process had already spoken. And when systems speak, the only useful response is to listen carefully. In the weeks after I left, I reviewed my time at the firm the way I would any other record. Chronologically, without emphasis. The CEO had a habit of speaking in summaries. He favored conclusions over process. In meetings, he would arrive late, skim the final slide, and deliver a verdict that sounded decisive because it omitted detail. That style impressed people who equated brevity with clarity. It also created space. Work moved upward without context. When outcomes were favorable, names were compressed into the team. When outcomes faltered, responsibility became specific, usually junior, often singular. I had watched this happen before. A market analyst blamed for projections revised after executive intervention. A product manager dismissed when timelines shifted at the board's request. Each time, the language was similar. Overreach, misalignment, learning moment. No one argued. The room would go quiet. The meeting would move on. My role had placed me close enough to notice patterns without being central enough to challenge them. I maintained detailed records because it was efficient. Notes from calls, follow-up emails, calendar invites with agendas attached, not as protection, as habit. Silence in that environment functioned as currency. Those who spoke less were assumed to know more. Those who explained themselves were considered uncertain. I adjusted accordingly. I was rarely interrupted. I wasn't invited to speak unless someone needed a fact confirmed. When I did speak, it was brief. Dates, names, status. That restraint was interpreted as compliance. I allowed that interpretation to stand. There were moments when the imbalance was explicit. During one review, the CEO referred to my work by saying, "She handled the coordination," then moved on without looking in my direction. It wasn't dismissive. It was efficient. I noted it and returned to my seat. Competence in that system was measured by invisibility. The pattern extended beyond me. Junior women were described as reliable, junior men as promising. Both worked similar hours. Only one was discussed as future leadership. I didn't comment. Observation precedes action. By the time the Redwood deal was assigned, the structure was already familiar. Authority flowed one way, accountability flowed another. That wasn't personal preference. It was operational design. Systems don't change because someone objects inside them. They change when their assumptions are tested elsewhere. The Redwood deal did not fail suddenly. It stalled in increments. The initial outreach went out on March 3rd. 12 firms, all approved contacts. I logged responses in a shared tracker that updated in real time. By March 7th, 7 had replied. 3 declined. 2 requested additional documentation. I forwarded those requests the same day. On March 10th, legal flagged a discrepancy in valuation assumptions. I summarized the issue in a 4-sentence email and scheduled a review for the following Monday. The meeting was postponed twice. When it finally occurred, the concern was acknowledged and deferred pending executive alignment. That alignment never materialized. By March 18th, 2 firms had paused communication. I noted the shift and escalated again, attaching the earlier correspondence. The response came 3 days later, proceed as planned. Proceeding meant waiting. I updated the tracker daily. No changes, no approvals, no revised guidance. On March 24th, 1 firm formally withdrew, citing timeline uncertainty. I logged it and forwarded the notice. Silence followed. The collapse was not a single event. It was an accumulation of non-decisions. The system held its breath until the market moved on. When the deal was officially declared dead, the summary reduced 6 weeks of documented delay to a single sentence. Execution issues at the coordination level. That sentence appeared in a slide deck I had not seen prior to the meeting. I recognized the language. It was designed to sound neutral while directing responsibility downward. There were no dates, no names, no references to deferred approvals or postponed reviews. I said nothing in response because nothing in that framing was accidental. Responsibility had been reassigned, not discovered. Accountability, when applied selectively, stops being corrective and becomes cosmetic. The CEO needed a visible point of failure. The system offered one. I was junior. I was present. I was already associated with the work. The evidence existed. It simply wasn't read aloud. That omission didn't make the record disappear. It just postponed when it would matter. After I left the firm, I did not contest the termination. There was no appeal process worth engaging, and none that would have altered the outcome. The decision had been made publicly. Reversing it would have required the same audience. Instead, I moved forward. 2 weeks later, I accepted a role with Northline Capital, a mid-market investment group specializing in strategic acquisitions. The position wasn't reactive. I had been in conversation with them since the previous winter, long before the Redwood deal stalled. At the time, it was contingency planning, a responsible habit. Northline operated quietly. No press releases, no public profiles. They preferred diligence over visibility. I was brought on as an associate within the corporate development team, tasked with evaluating potential targets and coordinating external negotiations. The authority attached to that role was limited but specific. When Northline pursued an acquisition, my position carried signing and representative privileges under defined conditions. Those conditions were formal, documented, and pre-approved. I didn't seek out my former employer. They appeared on a preliminary screening list 3 months later, flagged by a separate team. Declining revenue, leadership instability, a need for capital. The irony was procedural, not emotional. I disclosed the prior relationship immediately. Compliance required it. Legal reviewed the situation and confirmed there was no conflict that would preclude my involvement, provided all communications remained formal and rooted through counsel. They did. By the time negotiations advanced, Northline had already secured majority backing. The structure of the deal placed decision-making authority with a small, designated group. I was one of them. This wasn't leverage created in response to humiliation. It was authority granted for a legitimate purpose, under conditions established well before my termination. The system did not bend to accommodate me. I stepped into a role it already recognized. Once engaged, the process moved on schedules and clauses, not sentiment. Timelines were fixed, disclosures mandatory, authority distributed according to documentation, not memory. There was no mechanism for apology to alter those terms, only compliance or withdrawal. What had once been dismissed as coordination now carried institutional weight. That wasn't revenge, it was alignment. The merger meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at 9. Neutral location, glass conference room, external counsel present for both sides, water already poured when I arrived. I took the seat assigned to me and placed my folder on the table. Inside were the finalized term sheets, tabbed and labeled. I didn't open them. There was no need yet. The room filled gradually. Introductions moved clockwise. Titles were exchanged, roles clarified. The tone was professional, restrained, careful. When the CEO entered, he did so with the ease of someone accustomed to being late without consequence. He paused briefly at the door, scanning the room. His expression registered interest, then confidence. He hadn't seen me yet. He took his seat across the table, spoke to counsel, made a comment about timelines. It was light, familiar. The kind of comment meant to establish comfort. I waited. When his eyes finally reached my side of the table, there was a fraction of a second where recognition lagged. Then it arrived. His posture shifted slightly. Not alarm, adjustment. The room stayed quiet. No one reacted. No one filled the space. Silence settled in, deliberate and clean. I looked down at the folder again. The edge of the paper was perfectly aligned. I straightened it by habit and rested my hands beside it. Counsel began the formalities. Purpose of meeting, scope of discussion, confidentiality acknowledgments. Each item was confirmed aloud. Each confirmation reduced the range of outcomes. The CEO spoke once during that opening. A question about valuation assumptions. His tone was casual, controlled. He still hadn't addressed me directly. Introductions resumed where they had paused. When my turn came, the lead counsel spoke my name and role without emphasis. The title was accurate. The authority implied by it did not require explanation. The CEO's gaze stayed fixed on me this time. His face was composed, curious. Working, I nodded once, polite, nothing more. There was a pause, not awkward, expectant. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Chose silence. I respected the choice. The meeting proceeded into document review. Pages were distributed, clauses referenced by number. Counsel spoke. Notes were taken. I listened. I waited. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a process unfolding on schedule. Whatever recognition was occurring across the table did not alter the agenda. And by the time the first section concluded, it was already clear that the room no longer belonged to him. The reveal did not arrive as an announcement. It arrived as confirmation. Lead counsel reached the section of the agenda labeled Authority and Representation. He adjusted his glasses, referenced the page number, and began reading from the document in a steady, practiced tone. This acquisition is being conducted under the authority of Northline Capital's designated negotiating committee, he said. Final approvals are vested in the representatives listed here. He slid the page forward. Names were read. Titles, signatory thresholds. The language was procedural, unadorned. When my name was spoken, it was not emphasized. It didn't need to be. There was a pause, short, contained. The CEO leaned forward slightly. "I'm sorry," he said, smiling as if correcting a minor error. "There must be some confusion." No one responded immediately. Counsel continued. "Miss Morales is authorized to act on behalf of the acquiring entity for purposes of this transaction." The smile faded. The CEO's eyes moved from the document to me and back again. "That can't be right," he said, louder now. "She was an intern here." The room stayed quiet. I kept my hands on the table. Still, open. Counsel answered, not looking at him. "Her prior employment is not relevant to the authority conveyed by this agreement." The CEO let out a short breath. "I need a moment," he said. "This feels inappropriate." "There is no provision for pause at this stage," counsel replied. "We are within a scheduled review." He turned toward me. "Did you arrange this?" I didn't answer. Silence held. It wasn't hostile. It was procedural. He looked to his own counsel. "You didn't flag this." They spoke quietly. Papers shifted. A pen tapped once, then stopped. "This is a conflict," he said, sharper now. "She was terminated publicly." Counsel on our side responded. "Disclosure was made, compliance reviewed. No conflict was found." His voice rose. "This is absurd." I waited until he finished speaking. Then I spoke once. "This meeting will continue as outlined." It wasn't a challenge. It was a reminder. His face flushed. "You can't seriously expect." "The terms are fixed," counsel said, cutting in. "They've been in circulation for 3 weeks." The CEO's confidence fractured into motion. Hands moving, chair shifting. He stood, then sat again. "This isn't over," he said. "I'll take this to the board." "That is your right," counsel replied. "It does not alter today's authority." The realization settled unevenly. The outcome wasn't being decided in the room. It already had been. His voice dropped. "Elena," he said, "let's talk." I didn't look at him. Counsel closed the folder. "We'll proceed to signatures." The room remained silent. There was nothing left to negotiate. The weeks that followed unfolded without my involvement. The board convened twice before the end of the quarter. The first meeting produced no resolution. The second resulted in an announcement framed as a strategic transition. The language was careful: leadership realignments, interim oversight, market conditions. Formal objections were filed. They were denied, not publicly, procedurally. Each challenge met its deadline and failed on its merits. By the end of the year, the acquisition closed under the original terms. I wasn't present for the fallout. I learned about it the way most outcomes are learned, indirectly. A regulatory notice confirming the transfer of control. A trade publication noting executive departures. A brief update from counsel stating that all post-close obligations had been satisfied. The CEO's name appeared once more, months later, attached to a consulting role that didn't last. After that, it stopped appearing altogether. Access narrowed before reputation did. Invitations ceased. Advisory boards reshuffled. The network that had once absorbed him quietly rerouted around the absence. There were no confrontations. No final conversations. None were required. Northline reassigned me to another portfolio shortly after close. The transition was efficient. My role expanded incrementally. Authority adjusted to match responsibility. I continued to document my work the same way I always had. Order favors consistency. Occasionally, someone would reference the deal in passing. Not the intern, not the firing, just the transaction. A clean execution. A textbook example of disciplined acquisition. That was enough. Justice doesn't announce itself. It settles. What had been taken from me in public wasn't returned in kind. There was no stage for that. Status restored itself through alignment, not acknowledgement. I stayed where the work was. The matter concluded the way most things do when systems function as intended, without drama, without apology, and without reversal. And it remained finished.